And last but not least, I'm excited for a fireside chat with Ty Ahmad-Taylor. The title is "The Future is Clear or Blurry, depending on how visually communicate." Insights from Ty's 32 years working at NYTimes, at-home network, where Ty and I actually met and are fortunate to still be friends. Then he was at Samsung and then Meta, and now he joins Snap. Ty is VP of Monetization at Snap, 32 years in informational design, 26 doing consumer-facing software, and the last 25 doing interactive television before that. I am thrilled. It looks like Karina is starting her drawing shortly. Ty, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and excited to talk to you, everybody.
Cool. Let's start with, typically in these fireside chats, we do a little bit of kind of the past, the present, and the future. So when we first met, 27 years ago in Silicon Valley, we worked together at Home Network. You had, as I mentioned, the good or bad fortune to be my boss back then, and we're still friends. What back then, when you were at the New York Times, what made you jump in 1990s? What was it, like 96, I guess, to jump to the New York Times to at home or to Silicon Valley?
It was February of 96, and in 95, I was covering the internet, special effects in movies and video games, and Netscape had just gone public. I also had grown up in the Bay Area. And so what was important to me was, one, I was homesick. Two, rather than sort of cover what was going on, I really wanted to be a part of it. And three, Roger Black, who at that time was the creative director for At Home, had been fired from the New York Times. And so he had a vendetta to settle. So he was looking to sort of bring me on board to settle his vendetta. And I was more than happy to play my role in that Shakespearean tragedy.
So the transition, though, tell us a little bit about, in those days, you started as a designer, then creative director, obviously designing for print or graphics. And then back then in the early days of the internet in the mid 90s, what was your thinking process, or what changed as far as your design approach, if anything?
Sure. So I was an information graphics designer at the New York Times, which involved some page layout and page design, but it was essentially information design. And what we had to do, and what I was asked to do and tasked to do at Home, was to come up with broadband internet pages. At that time, Yahoo's pages were loading and were sized at about 25K. And so we had a budget allocation of roughly 125K per page. And so we took a different approach, and web portals were all the rage at that time. And so we were designing a web portal at a 640 by 480 screen dimension that was 125K to load. And we did stupid things like we used rendered buttons that were art instead of text that was, rendered through CSS and tables. I did an animated GIF that was 18.6 megabytes of the Unabomber morphing
I actually remember
else. That. Yeah, it took down all of the servers because nobody had, we didn't have any staging servers in place. So that quickly necessitated putting staging servers in place. And I got a stern talking to about bringing down the service. But so
tell the audience on that, Ty, like At Home Network, what was it? So the context. We were pushing the envelope on bandwidth. No worries. So tell the audience on that, because most everybody that was on the internet was on 14.4 or 96 baud modems versus At Home. So give us share with the audience how do you describe what we were doing?
What we were doing was we were providing internet access over cable modems, and it was high-speed internet access, so it was not dial-up. And at the time when we launched in Fremont, California, which is our test bed for the entire United States, the access was uncapped, but it basically was a D3 circuit, which is 45 megabits per second, which you can now get into your home, of course. But that's what we were delivering to the entire city of Fremont. So we had 100 testers, and so those testers, on average, would see 1.5 to 2 megabits down, based upon the DOCSIS standards or the cable IP standards of the time, delivered down into their homes, which was just several orders of magnitude faster than anything that they could get over dial-up telephone lines.
So that enabled you and us, obviously, more visually creative and or larger GIFs or GIFs or videos, et cetera. I mean, every day we were trying to push the envelope.
Full screen video, larger photography, which is something that Evan was responsible for and for popularizing on the service, and doing text over photography in a way that is now not considered efficient either, but it was something that we did at the time because we didn't know any better.
And we were all a bit young back then. So in 1997, 12 months after we joined, we were fortunate At Home Network went public. What was your biggest learning experience through those early days on the internet that maybe still is part of your empowering others, or what was some of that history of then and now that is still with your mindset?
I think what we assumed at the time is that people wanted a full screen experience and that they wanted a garden experience. The person who managed me came from eWorld, from Apple, which was a managed garden experience. It was a locked-in experience where you basically had a safe environment, and we were acting as our own sort of like human-curated guide to the internet. And if you say that in 2023, it seems like absurd. Like, who needs a human-curated guide to the internet? If anything, I was talking to somebody last night, and they said one of the great uses of the new artificial intelligence agents is that you can use it for travel. You can say, give me the top 10 restaurants in Paris where I should eat, the top 10 museums that I should see. And it actually renders pretty good results that you can then edit and provides the links to those rather than you having to go search them out. But at that time, we were using human-curated guidance and images and to help people discern what was the best of the web. We did stupid stuff like fight over the categories. We should have lifestyle categories, should have sports categories, should have a games category, and things of that sort that no longer make sense when you are working as you are now today with sort of like with abundance. The categorizations don't make sense.
Absolutely. One of the things I want to jump in, I mean, we had a fireside chat earlier with Clement, who just joined as DeepMind as VP of Research, and he's done big company and startups. And after a couple gigs at big companies after At Home Network, you founded a company called FanFeeder. Tell us why you did that. You jumped from the big company to a startup company, and a little bit of like what you learned during that process.
Sure. So I started my company in the fall of 2008 when the world was burning, and I thought that it was an opportunity essentially to sort of both hire engineers cheaply, but also to sort of like be able to raise capital. I was turned down 43 times for raising venture capital, and it was on the 44th meeting that I actually was able to then secure $2.2 million in what was then an A round for the company. The seed money I had provided myself. And so perhaps I was foolish in thinking that I could start something during an economic downturn, but I wanted to do it when valuations were low, and I thought there was an opportunity to hire great engineers. And I had a cluster of great engineers who worked with me on using Python as the primary framework that we were using to develop the site. All of that having been said, I also wanted to do something myself, having seen other entrepreneurs be successful. And I had the time and energy in my 30s to do it. It's not something that I would pursue now in my 50s, but certainly at that time, it was a valuable learning experience for me. And we were able to have a successful exit and return capital at a multiple to the investors and to the people who worked with me.
Tell the audience a little bit about what was FanFeeder, just for context.
It was real-time sports aggregation. And so what I mean by that is I was a Golden State Warriors fan who lived in New York, and I wanted to be able to get all the Golden State Warriors information without having to go to, and you're going to laugh at some of the brand names I'm going to mention, but without having to go to Yahoo, without having to go to Bleacher Report, without having to go to AOL, which are all sources of sports news, or the blogs that the team ran, or the official NBA website, or ESPN, or any place else. I wanted all that news and information along with the real-time scores delivered to me and collated automatically. So what we did is I licensed photos from Getty and from AP Images. We ran those along the feed. And then we had something using a bag of words, sort of like machine learning techniques to basically give you all of the news and information around the Golden State Warriors. We had to do the same thing for example, the San Antonio Spurs versus Tottenham Hotspur. And I didn't know the difference between Tottenham Hotspur, which is a football team, to use the British term, versus the San Antonio Spurs, which is a basketball team. And that company was eventually sold to Samsung. And we deployed
What
the technology. We deployed
go
technology
ahead.
at Samsung. Sorry about that.
No, that's good. And so during those days, what was your biggest mistake? What did you learn from the most? Because in the audience, there's plenty of very technical people and people want to start businesses. Everybody
Sure.
goes through ups and downs as a roller coaster. What was the one that you think you learned the most from?
Well, the thing that we're all doing and that you're all doing is that you're not building trucks at a Ford factory, right? And so if you're building trucks at a Ford factory, you want to make sure that the assembly line is working and you have robots and you have other kinds of capital that you have to worry about and just-in-time delivery of mufflers and shit like that. Pardon me for cursing.
No, I like it.
What you find in the information industries that we're all working in is that the capital that you have is human capital. And I don't mean to like de-essentialize the humanity of the people who are working for us, but the real investment and the real thing that you have are people. And so with understanding that human capital is the most important thing that we can have, hiring great people and reducing risk were really the key learnings that I had. But it also meant that I got very good at firing people who were underperforming or not up to snuff and who were not doing the work that was required. And, you know, as a CEO, there are essentially three things for you to do. The first thing is to make as much money as possible ethically. And the flip side of that is don't run out of money. The second thing for you to do is to set priorities and non-priorities for your team. And then the third thing is setting culture. Do you want to run an inclusive team where the best ideas are heard, or do you want to do a tops-down organization where you're sort of the dictator? And what I found is that the inclusive organizations where you migrate most of the decision-making to ICs who are closest to the problem that needs to be solved, those are the companies that are successful. Those are the teams that are successful.
I love it. I think that's fantastic. And it's actually a great segue because, you know, that was kind of your learning as you've shared at the entrepreneur days and the early, you know, startup days, but also you've worked at major companies, Comcast, Viacom, THX, recently Meta, where I think you had 800 people on your team. I mean, it sounds like it's very similar, or what are the similars and the differences that you're kind of now leveraging as a senior executive with many different responsibilities than you actually had as a smaller team running your own startup, or are they the same?
The principles are the same: making as much money as you can ethically, and setting priorities and non-priorities for your team. And in addition, the last part, which is setting culture. Part of the culture that I also had was promoting people and growing people. And that's actually, people talk about their superpowers, or they're a ninja at this or a ninja at that. Like, the thing that I'm deeply most passionate about is developing people and bringing them along. And I think that that's really important for a CEO or for any executive leader to do for their organization. And they should be thinking more broadly and strategically, using systems thinking about how the company makes its monetization goals, whether you're on the consumer side of the business or on the monetization side of the business.
Cool. So let's start talking about a little bit of visual content and visually communicating, you know, as an extension of your design background. At Meta, you know, part of what you were overseeing was many different products. Tell us a little bit about the different products and how important was, you know, visually communicating or visual tech to your role there? And obviously that's going to transition to our conversation about, you know, today at Snap.
Yeah, one of the things that we're doing at Meta is, like, when I came there, Instagram was really about photos and Facebook was really about, you know, photos and text-based updates. And what both services are now morphing into becoming is entertainment platforms where video is king. The challenge is that if you look at the effective monetization in terms of dollars per hour for video, it is lower than what you're getting for either for tech, for photos, or for short videos, because the new competitive feature set is like, how do we compete with TikTok? And I think every company is sort of facing that. And TikTok is essentially an entertainment company. And the core of what they do is that they are able to string together clips that have the same content. Let's say that it's a video of a 25-year-old woman who does an ollie, which is a skateboarding trick, at a skateboarding park near the ocean. They can show you 25 videos that look like that because they have deep content understanding of what's transpiring in the video. And they get that visually, and they get that through human curation, but a lot of it is machine learning. And that's the advantage that they hold over others. And so what you saw during my time at Meta was the evolution from static photos to short video, then to long form video, but understanding that long form video monetizes at roughly half the rate, or the goal is to get it to monetize at half the rate of what you were getting with things like stories or with the static photos that people post in their newsfeed on Instagram itself. And so those are the changes that occurred during my time at Meta. At Snap, we are also competing with TikTok in the attention economy, but we are primarily a messaging service that uses the camera as a window into people's expression of personality, with the notion that you don't have to be as precious as you are on Instagram. So rather than presenting your optimized life, what we're urging people to do is to share their real life with their close friends and contacts.
And so, curious, in that context, how do you personally share photos, create photos? What excites you personally? And then how does that, obviously you're not personally making money off of your own images, so it's obviously going to be different. But I'm sure because your DNA is a creative person. And so what do you capture? Where do you capture pictures now? Obviously, aside from only on Snap, I assume. But there's got to be other, what has changed in your creative capturing of content?
What I do is the primary outlet that I use is stories on both Instagram and on Snap. And, what I find there is that what I'm trying to do is to make short movies and make them entertaining. And typically, Evan's known me for multiple decades. My sense of humor is self-deprecating. I love poking fun at myself. So, I've got a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old. So it's, my foibles with them, my missteps, my inability to dance in their eyes, things of that sort. But it also shows my passions and the things that I'm most concerned about, which is typically art and architecture, and my ability to bear witness to that. And also, the stereotypical thing like food and pictures of nature. But what I'm trying to do is create a compelling short film. And I often mark the last segment of a story that I do as Finn. And then I don't feel too precious about it because I know that it's ephemeral. And so what I'm trying to do is communicate, what's going on in my life in a way that people understand. The most moving thing that I did recently was my father passed in February. And so I did a slight homage to him on Instagram in a story. I was able to capture and save the video, but it was only up for 24 hours. And people celebrated his life as I did through that form. And that felt really affirming for me and gave me a great sense of community. And that's one of the ways that video and images can really convey emotion.
That piece was fantastic. I remember watching that. And, also on a side note, I think have always learned from you. And one of the things is I keep up to date now with what are the most important and cutting edge art in museum and architecture just by following your photographs. Otherwise, me, I would have no idea about what are the cool things to go check out. So I usually then go try to schedule the museum trip after you've already showed me that I should go to it. So tell me a little bit about that. So part of that is probably you're creating on the different channels for your, the way you want to create, but also, isn't it also R&D? I mean, do you feel like it's similar for you, kind of like understanding the products and where things are going? Because I want to start leading into where do you think things are going next in visual communicating? I mean, so what are you missing now, or what are you looking for, either for your own experience and for Snap?
What I'm missing is an AI that can assemble material. I'm on the board of GoPro, and so I shoot a lot of GoPro footage. I'm not allowed to talk about GoPro, but I'll just say I have a lot of GoPro footage on my camera. I have video and still photos on my phone. The act of assembly and the editing experience, that seems to me to be a prime candidate for artificial intelligence to do something smart around the collection of photos and videos that people have. And you see glimmers of it with things like memories on Facebook or on this day from Apple and things of that sort, but it still isn't seamless. And what none of the video and photo sharing services do is have an exclusion filter. And so what they don't do is they don't really accommodate real life relationships. Like, I'm divorced and I had a long-term relationship that ended 2 years ago. Those people constantly show up in my feed. And so what I would like is an exclusion filter that says, I don't want to see this person. But there's no service, whether it's Google Photos, Amazon Photos, Apple Photos, there's no service that allows for exclusion of certain individuals to the best of your ability. And so they crop up and that's emotionally painful. So there's a real opportunity, not just from an editing standpoint, but from what's displayed on a rotating basis standpoint, to take into account the human relationships and how fragile they can sometimes be. And those are elements that I think are ripe for exploration.
I agree 200%. I mean, it feels like, correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like there's this kind of contextual relevance reasoning, or at least knowing us in different ways. You and I are very different and have similarities and differences, but our content, or the whether or not the images, the videos, the stories, everything that we've created should be repackaged selectively. Obviously, there's this balance between discovery in an AI way. It only shows us what we want versus only shows us the things we would like to have one day. So, I mean, I think it's very hard to do well, and it's easy to do poorly.
I completely agreed. Completely agreed.
Okay, so let's take the next step. A couple other questions. So tell us, what's your main focus today at Snap? I think the title is VP of Monetization, which ties perfectly back to what you were saying earlier about being focused on creating value and empowering a team. But are there specific projects that you can share that you're working on?
Sure. We recently announced that we have 780 million monthly active users, and we publicly announced that we have over 400 million daily active users. And so what we've been able to do is to corner the youth demographic, which is the people who are aged 13 to 25. We're also leading the world with regards to AR, or augmented reality development, which is in many ways is mixed reality, which is showing you overlays on top of what you're seeing visually, either through your camera phone or eventually through glasses. And so what I'm really trying to do is if you look at our app, it's actually 5 different apps in one. There's a camera that we open up to the camera uniquely. So we open up to the creation aspect of imagery, and we have lenses that you can apply, which are augmented reality lenses that people use on a regular basis. That cohort is known as camera lovers, the people who just use lenses, and that's one cohort. There's another cohort of people who use it exclusively, and this is by far the largest cohort. They use it exclusively to communicate with one another. So it's a communications channel. But again, you're showing your real unvarnished life rather than sort of the optimized life that you might see at my former employer. And so that's the second tab. Then the first tab is a maps tab that shows you the location of yourself and your friends within a given geography. And that also has ripe opportunities for AR augmentation as well. And then we have our fourth tab, which is called our Discover tab, that contains your friends' stories, which are ephemeral videos and images that your friends put forth, along with curated content from content providers like ESPN and others. And then the fifth tab is our Spotlight tab. And Spotlight looks very much like what you would see on TikTok, but it's unconnected video, meaning it's not from your friends, but it's video that you would like strung together through content understanding in a way that you find entertaining while you're waiting for your friends to potentially respond to a Snap message or something of that sort. And so the totality of that represents vast opportunities for monetization, whether it's through augmented reality lenses that are sponsored on the camera tab, whether it's ads that occur in between stories in the Discover tab, or whether it's ads that occur between disconnected content in the Spotlight tab, whether it's this is the best place to get coffee locations on the map and other augmented reality things. And then last but not least, you can monetize the messaging tab, which is not visual, with things like lead generation and click-to-messaging, which is very popular at other providers.
Cool. So where does the My AI that just came out, because we had a presentation earlier today on a large language model, and obviously that's the topic that everybody's talking about. Is that part of one of those?
Yeah, My AI occurs in the messaging thread. And right now you can ask it questions, both pertinent and impertinent, and it will answer them using the ChatGPT base. What I'm really excited about is the opportunity for it to return visual results. Like, these are the places you should go in Paris, and these are what they look like. If I'm fixated on Paris, it's because I'm dragging my kids there on Thanksgiving. So I've been using it for my travel planning.
I love that. Music to my ears. It should definitely deliver visuals. Obviously, you're preaching to the choir here. We got a couple minutes left. This is fantastic. Obviously, we could do this for hours, but the last couple minutes just kind of on the future and advice. I mean, what you talked about your own creating what you wanted, earlier, about how contextually relevant content could be recreated and shared, what would be the ideal visual tech that you'd want to have, you know, in 20 years, but you'd like it today? What is that big picture, you know, kind of visual tech solution you'd love to have for you personally?
Yeah, I think there are 4 companies that are working on it. Magic Leap is still in existence. They're working on it. I think Google's working on it. I think Apple's working on it. I think Meta's working on it. I think we're working on it. But ultimately, a form factor that looks like glasses that gives you information about the environment that you're in that you otherwise would not be party to. So, you know, where is there a coffee shop that's just down the street? And who is this person that I know reports to me, but I don't remember their name? So please help me with that. The question is that the compute load for doing that doesn't fit into glasses. So ultimately, I think that any glasses, if I were to foretell the future, would have to be paired with a phone so that they can use the compute power and the bandwidth that a phone provides. But essentially, a way to provide a mixed reality environment that folks live in. And what's interesting is that a lot of what you see in science fiction movies is a good foretelling of the future, but none of them have really foretold what mixed reality would look like or how it would function in the way that Minority Reports told a lot of the way that we would think about the future with regards to automated cars and manipulating things in a touchless environment. Nobody's really foretold what augmented reality and mixed reality looks like. And so I think that it's an area that's ripe for innovation, and it's nothing but visually oriented.